If Pokemon was rebooted, would we finally get an answer for how Pokeballs work? One of the most interesting questions often asked by the Pokemon fanbase is, how do Pokeballs work? What happens to Pokemon while they are inside one? To answer these questions with my own world-building ideas, I'm going to ask a completely different set of questions and answer those. Just to start with, I promise. On a related note, I suppose another good question is, who invented the first Pokeballs? Bulbapedia noted that Professor Westwood is credited for the invention of the modern-day Pokeball, but he is never mentioned in any of the games, so I'm leaving him behind for the sake of this exercise. Also, Pokemon Legends Arceus has given a little insight into their history and how they work by saying that they were a recent invention to its set time period, that Pokeballs don't actually have any technology attached to them, Pokemon just possess the innate ability to shrink themselves down. Which begs so many more questions than it answers. Why do they possess this ability? How did people discover this? And what gave them the idea to take advantage of it and make the balls? Did someone just bump into their Pokemon one day while holding a teapot and it just jumped in? Yeah, I played through the entire game. They never dive any deeper into that lore. From a world-building perspective, this was a very poorly executed and obvious hand wave so players could have Pokeballs available. Such a wasted opportunity, especially since the animation of a Pokeball capturing a Pokemon looks very much like it is the Pokeball doing all the work, not the other way around. So gosh darn it, that is how I am going to keep it. With that in mind, let's get this episode started with another round of If True, Else What? If Pokeballs turn these organic creatures into a form of information that can be stored in a computer and sent far away, should that technology not have much broader applications as well? For example, doing the same thing to humans or teleporting people from place to place. Now, we have seen teleport pads in the games, the first generation even, whilst inside Sabrina's gym or the Silphco building. So why don't we see this technology used by everyday people in the Pokemon world? Why do cars or trains exist? Wouldn't there be travel hubs of teleporters taking you to nearby cities instead of having to fly there? Or walk? Indeed, the idea I'm putting forward is that Pokeballs and teleport pads are in fact the same technology at work. Additionally, it must be pretty cheap technology to produce because of the vast supply of Pokeballs available. Yes, I'm aware of infinity energy being responsible for a lot of things in the Pokemon world, but like I said, this is a practice and study of game design. The goal being to take one idea and just run with it, see how far it can take you. In actual game development for a reboot, things like infinity energy could make a strong comeback, but for now, I'm putting it to the side as well. When addressing something as simple as the technology involved with Pokeballs, we actually have to consider the state of the world around that technology. Remembering back to my Remapping the World episode, building out the lands and histories are complicated beasts to tackle, to say the least. Lots of things need to be considered. What impact does the invention of Pokeballs have on society? We know that it has had a big effect on the whole world, so what was the state of the world before then? I'll attempt to answer these questions, but first we have to know what our limits of design are. We have a mechanic and we want it to make sense narratively. So, what are the rules we want to stick to? After all, Pokeballs aren't just a narrative point of interest, we are trying to justify the mechanics at work in the gameplay. Pokemon can break out of the Pokeballs. They still have consciousness inside them. You can't catch them while they are unconscious, and finally, the information is unique and cannot be cloned despite being able to deposit it into a computer. So here's a heads up for you now. I will be going into a fair amount of detail about this idea I put forward. This is an exercise of just how deep one can go about fleshing out even a small detail of the world you create and all that can branch off it. Especially since the Pokeball is basically the core concept that the whole franchise revolves around: pocket monsters. The idea I would like to put forward is to actually give this technology a name and a sci-fi logic behind it, as best I can. Dematerialized Atomic Tissue Archive, or DATA for short. A fictional type of matter conversion that, with the appropriate technology, could transfer and store that energy into specialized devices, such as a ball or a computer. To clarify, it is a unique type of energy. It is not a set of ones and zeros. Special computers have to be built to store such information. You can't copy it line by line or create energy out of nothing, so you can't clone it. We know that Bill was the character to invent the technology that could store this data into a computer, but who invented this new type of information? We could create a new character for this purpose, or we could use one currently set up, sort of. I am going to say that it is Bill's mother that invented the data for use of capturing the magical creatures. They would soon be known as pocket monsters or Pokemon as a result of this invention. I think 20 years prior to the first game starting is good. It gives plenty of time for society to adjust to the idea of capturing them into balls whilst being new enough for societal integration of the technology to only develop on a surface level. I'd also say that the PC storage system might have only been around for a year or two. Or only publicly available for that long, anyway. Laws take a little time to be written and enforced when something new about technology arises, especially tech that would ultimately shape the future of society at its core. We can see this in our own world with the invention of the internet and social media being so accessible. Our lives are very different now to what we had 20 years ago with instant globalized social networking and fast, powerful computers at our fingertips. All the world's collective knowledge and viewable entertainment fits in your pocket. Things have changed. So too would things change in the Pokemon world as new ideas are inspired from this new form of energy. Since computers would be able to analyze the data contained inside a Pokeball, they would want to assign someone to create something that would catalog and index this information, like some kind of Pokédex thing. Data could very well be the entire reason why the Pokédex exists, and how it is able to collect information on Pokémon. It is a computer that analyzes Pokeballs as they hold the valuable data inside. Also in the Pokemon world, construction projects for teleport hubs would still be in the works to make transport more publicly accessible. Perhaps only the most populated cities have a few working hubs. Most places would still rely strongly on the technology already in place, such as cars, trains, and boats, etc. Even over time and the game series, just because the player can teleport to places doesn't mean that they should, because they have a job to do. They are meant to walk around everywhere in order to either document Pokemon or train them. The technology being available doesn't mean the player has to use it and skip ahead to different areas, although it might be fine to let them anyway. It means that we have the opportunity to explore narratively why they wouldn't want to. Of course, this also helps one more thing: designing the landscapes. As I brought up in Remapping the World, you wouldn't have to have a desert next to a forest, next to a frozen tundra, next to a beach, and so on, if you had teleport transit hubs to each of those regions. You can have those areas be far away and isolated, with only a hub entrance be the way to get there. So, with those bonus details out of the way, let's get into the details of Pokeballs with this new form of energy by asking the hard questions and putting it to the test. The first question that comes to mind is, wouldn't Pokeballs be able to work on people as well? And yes, they totally would. However, Pokeballs can have safety measures programmed into the technology to not allow for something like that to happen. Although, wouldn't it be an interesting plot development to have someone modify a Pokeball and put a person inside it? Alternatively, we could of course skip over a lot of what I just said and say that data only works in tandem with the inherent magic inside Pokemon, which would explain why they don't work on people or objects and would only be good for Pokeballs. But that would still not explain teleport pads seen in the games, though you could just take them out entirely for the reboot or say that it is a different technology. I just wanted to ask and have a go at answering the more in-depth implications about what this technology could do for the world. My next immediate concern about this tech is, what happens to this different form of matter if the technology breaks or fails? maybe data can only be sustained by the technological equipment inside the ball or storage boxes. Without it in place, data naturally reverts back to its physical form. What about healing them inside Pokeballs at a Pokemon Center? Healing stations detect abnormalities or injuries in data and goes about correcting the problem. This would also be an extremely new technology with an inventor too. In fact, if data can indeed work on people, then this invention is essentially a cure for all diseases in people too. Free healthcare and longer living. Okay, so now that whatever creature is turned into data is safe, how is it still conscious? This is the beauty of science fiction. Let's make up a reason why. Data might have a somewhat physical form that looks holographic. You could see inside the ball to find a wispy, ethereal version of your Pokemon. They aren't in a physical state, so they don't get tired or hungry, though they will likely get bored if left in there too long. As the game developers stated in interviews, Pokeballs contain a tiny environment, so they feel comfortable inside. We could say that being in this form of matter, they are simply being fed sensory information, sounds, images, and more to make them comfortable. Which is in no way like brainwashing, any more than Pokemon battles are dog fighting. Just nothing of the sort. Ridiculous to even make such a... Why would you think that? So, if they are in this form of energy, how could they break out of the ball? I think it might take time for the Pokeball to program itself for the Pokemon in question, giving said Pokemon time to mess up the procedure. Breaking out of the ball is just them resisting the initial process of conversion. Why can't I catch Pokemon that has fainted on the floor? The programming step of a Pokeball needs to interact with their mind in order to allow them to have proper sensory input. Without that input, the Pokemon would go insane very quickly because it would later wake up inside the ball but not be able to see, smell, feel, or hear anything. That would be torture, and therefore, the Pokemon would immediately fight to escape. Alternatively, or additionally, we could say that Pokeballs require the consent of a Pokemon in order to catch them. You can't get consent from what is not conscious. Finally, what does using more expensive Pokeballs do? Naturally, these just have higher quality and more durable components inside them to assist in the process. Okay, so I omitted one little detail about this technology some of you might have thought about: trading evolutions. How does the act of trading evolve some Pokemon? This is one of those weird details I didn't like in the games. Not to say that I didn't like the act of trading in order to get new Pokemon. I mean, I didn't like that there were types of Pokemon that you couldn't find in the wild. I would want to come up with a process or circumstance in nature in which you could evolve a Graveler into Golem or a Scyther into Scizor. It's just that the process of trading happens to fast-track or spiritually replicate the circumstances. Ultimately, I'm not even sure we need trade evolutions anymore, but whatever, we have the option here. So, what is my answer to allow this change to happen? Technically speaking, there wouldn't be any difference between transporting a Pokeball into a PC and transporting it to someone else's PC or team. But what about the process of moving a Pokemon from one Pokeball directly into another one? A Pokeball that had a different Pokemon in it just an instant ago. The Pokeballs are reprogramming themselves for the new Pokemon entering inside it, but there is some small residue or sensation of the previous inhabitant that inspires this change in the new one. Moving away from all the sci-fi, I want to go into the societal implications of the technology by exploring the laws that would accompany them. Because Pokeballs are so accessible, it means that the population of wild Pokemon could quickly become completely owned by people, or that just about anyone could gain hundreds of anything they stumble upon. Laws would be written to help balance not just the ecosystem, but help bring societal equilibrium too. It would be pretty annoying gameplay if the comfy shorts boy threw out all 40 Rattata from the local area, one at a time. This also means that we could accidentally have the most powerful trainers be the only ones able to catch and keep all the most powerful Pokemon found in nature. To help prevent daily gang wars on the street, let's write some laws. The first one being exactly what we see in the games, that you can only have 6 on your person at any given time, and that is that. But then, why wouldn't everyone use 6 at all times? Why would anyone stop at just 2 or 4? You'd think that everyone would just start with low-level Pidgeys and Caterpies and work their way up with a full team at all times. So there must be another level to the lore. What if you were only allowed 6 Pokemon under your ownership, period? Then most people would have 2 or 3 at home, not for battling, they are just pets or help around the house. Trainers would now only go out and about with the ones they do intend to battle with. The more serious trainers who do it beyond just a hobby would naturally have more and stronger Pokemon on their team, which is exactly what we see in the games. These laws could even have existed from long before Pokeballs were even invented. Obviously, our players don't want to be stuck at that number, and there would be plenty of examples in the game where there is an exception or special permissions expanding those limits. Professors, researchers, gym leaders, and of course, talented trainers are allowed to catch more than 6. Earning gym badges grants you upgrades to your capturing permission slip or Pokemon license. In effect, your badges are proof that you are allowed to own more since you've demonstrated yourself to be a capable trainer. Personally, I would welcome the challenge of having to work within these limits over the course of the game. However, I doubt most people would, and since this is a world-building exercise, we should work with what we established in previous topics. This is the part where I refer back to my narrative-based video, Professors and the Pokédex, where I mention a Pokemon University, of which you are under their employ. Researchers like professors working on the Pokédex project can get as many as they want. This means that since the player is an understudy of their local professor, they too have no limit. They are acting on behalf of the professor, mind you, so technically the Pokemon you catch actually belong to your professor, which by extension belong to the university, which by further extension belong to you, the player, because, well, go watch the episode. Since the Pokédex project requires extensive testing, you really have permission to do whatever you want with however many you are able to catch. I think that the university would likely have extra rules about the Pokemon that you obtain that might be interesting, such as that involving legendaries, so I'll talk about that in a future topic, but let's say for now, they let you do as you please. This sounds like an unfair advantage the player would have over all the other NPCs, and frankly, it would be. However, it would certainly go a long way to explaining how you have such an edge over everyone else. They all have to make do with what they have, whilst you have the luxury of choice and strategizing. In fact, only those truly committed to battling would have the heart to release their 3 darling Caterpies who love them so, just to make room for others. I would love to see the first gym leader you beat congratulate you on your success as a trainer and say, "You are now allowed to own 12 Pokemon, though to remind you, the law still doesn't allow you to have more than 6 Pokemon on your person." Then they ask to see your Pokemon license to upgrade it and go, "Ah, I see. Oak's understudy. Good for you." People who find out about your special permissions would have varying opinions on it from, "Oh neat, I can't wait for the Pokédex to get the updates you're working on," to, "I bet you just love spitting in the face of everyone who has to work for it." Lastly, concerning the laws surrounding Pokeballs are villains, specifically the ones that are criminally inclined. Obviously, there are people who wouldn't follow the rules, and I think this yields for some pretty interesting mechanics, so I'm going to come back to this on my talk on villains in a future episode. You can look forward to that. Getting back to the sci-fi, since we have now established a law that says you can't have more than 6 on you at any time, what happens when you catch more than that? I always thought it was weird that the Pokemon I caught would suddenly teleport into Bill's PC. Wouldn't you, as the character, have to do that manually? So, sure enough, let's invent some tech that covers that. The Data Transport Pad, a device on your backpack that uses quantum entanglement to teleport Pokeballs to the receiver back at the lab. This tech is issued to your character through university funding, of course, with one of the professor's aides ready to deposit your catch into a PC. All we see after a catch is the player character tap the ball on the side of their backpack and zip, it is gone. Okay, so I'm throwing a lot of information and ideas out here. Keep in mind that what the player learns about the world of a game is up to the method a developer puts it all into the game. We could have a long, boring NPC rant that just tells you all this not important stuff before you get into the action, Or, more interestingly, all this stuff can be discovered by talking to the lab assistants, reading books on the shelves, interacting with the devices laid about the lab. The Pokemon games do this a lot already, though the amount of information they put is vague and short, I suppose to highlight how not important it all is. But like I mentioned in a previous discussion, to give the world a feeling of being lived in and deep with history, it's these missable details that give it that depth. You don't have to read the item descriptions in Dark Souls or Bloodborne, but it is so fascinating and even rewarding to do so. We could have information hidden throughout the world that hints at great things, with no quest marker to tell you what series of actions you must do to get special items or even secret, rare Pokemon. Now, I have just a few final notes before closing out. We have looked at the recent history behind the technology of Pokeballs, but what about further back than that? What did people do before there were Pokeballs to even call them Pokemon by? How did they catch them? How did they train and travel with them? What were the technologies involved? What about before the civilian limit of 6 Pokemon per person? Were armies of Pokemon gathered around an individual as a sign of wealth and power? These are very important questions to answer, as there should be lots of evidence of them throughout the world. Here in our world, we might have digital devices that can access all the information on the internet through them, but you can still find evidence of books around the place. Plus, you just know that there would be an old man NPC complaining about how easy us kids get it with a good old "back in my day" line that you didn't ask for. And finally, one last interesting note. What about Porygon? Now that we have established details about this technology, we could have a solid narrative to explore about how this Pokemon would come into existence. Being that the PC storage system is extremely new tech, maybe this isn't something that would happen in the first game of the reboot, but instead something explored after some more time has passed. Like I said, energy doesn't come from nothing and you can't write the code. But what if you gathered the energy and reorganized it like a Pokemon? What would happen, a curious scientist might say. Well, that was fun, at least for me. As I mentioned earlier, the Pokeball is basically the core concept of the franchise and is probably as much, if not more of an icon for it than Pikachu is. Exploring that concept, I went very focused on the small details, yet I probably only scratched the surface, giving quick solutions to meaningful questions. As such, I will not go so deep into sci-fi exploration in future topics. Let me know what you think. Is it better to just leave the technology as a mystery to us? Could the world of Pokemon benefit from fleshing out what technology is available and all of its applications? Would you enjoy seeing evidence of the old technology and methods of training Pokemon? Just so you know, I really tried hard to research this topic for what is known about Pokeballs. It was very difficult to find anything concrete from the mainline games. A lot of information that people have are from other forms of media, and I didn't really want to include too much of that. It was also difficult, even on the information from other media, to find solid sources for where people were getting this stuff from. So I apologize if I missed or inaccurately represented something. The main point of this exercise was to throw everything out the window anyway and come up with new stuff. I hope you enjoyed this lengthy dive into detailing out tech. If you got this far, and you are not subscribed, you should press the button. My Wooloo leaps with joy every time someone does. Press the like button and hit that bell to get notified of when I release a new video. And as always, continue to be wonderful to each other, and I'll see you next time. Back in my day, we didn't have all this what's-it crap. We used a net. It was fine then and it's fine now. Losing a limb when they escaped was a rite of passage.